everyone, and welcome to our presentation. My name is Chris, and today we'll be presenting our arguments for the invalidation of U.S. Patent 10643-200. Our goal in this project was to explain the error made by the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office in granting patent 10643-200 to Block 8 for their POS system and card reader. Now I'll pass it off to Noreen.
When we first started this project, we started with learning a little bit more about what patent law is and what it entails. So first we started with what is a patent. A patent is a grant. A patent is a grant from the government that gives an inventor the sole right to exclude others from making, selling, or using their invention for a period of time. Since we're in the United States government grants patents, and they are administered by the United States Patent and Trademark Office. So in exchange for having sole ownership of their invention through the patent, the inventor must disclose all details of the invention, including how it's made, how it works, etc. So there are three main parts of the patent. First are the drawings, which are any figures that are included in the patent that describe what the invention is. Next is the specification, which includes sections such as background information about the invention, a summary of the invention, and detailed descriptions of the figures included in the patent. And the last part are the claims, which are arguably the most important part of the patent. The claims state what the invention actually is, which is extremely important for determining infringement litigation. There are two types of claims, independent claims and dependent claims. Independent claims describe the invention as a whole, rather than detailed parts of it, while dependent claims go into the specific aspects of the broader invention that is described in the independent claim. So when we were studying patent law, we studied four main laws that were relevant to our patent. So first was 35 U.S.C. 101, which defines what can actually be patented. Next was U.S.C. 102, which states that in order for an invention to receive a patent, it must be novel. Next was U.S.C. 103, which states that in order for an invention to receive a patent, it must not be an obvious invention. And then lastly was U.S.C. 112, which just went over the written description of what has to be included in the description of the invention in the patent. So we focused on two main concepts when working on our project, which were prior art and non-obviousness. So prior art is any information that relates to the subject of the claimed invention that is publicly disclosed before the patent application for the claimed invention is filed. So this means this could include any patent, any YouTube videos, any essays that describe the same subject matter as the claimed invention, and were publicly disclosed before the patent application for the claimed invention was filed. So we used prior art under U.S.C. 102 to prove that our patent, the 200 patent, was invalid. Next, the next concept is non-obviousness. This means that a person with ordinary skill in art must not find it obvious to combine two or more pieces of prior art to make the invention. Because if someone who is knowledgeable in the subject area of the claimed invention can put together pieces of public information to form the invention, then the invention is obvious, it's not novel, and it should not be granted a patent. So next, I will be handing it over to Diego to talk a little bit more about our patent.
So the patent in question is 10643-200. It's a point-of-sale system created by Block 8, formerly known as Square. They are a company with a net worth of $38.27 billion, co-founded by Jack Dorsey, who is one of the inventors of this patent. And they specialize in POS systems, point-of-sale systems, which are essentially financial transaction systems that facilitate user interaction between the customer and seller. The product in question is one of Square's first products, the magnetic stripe card reader, which is a card reader that plugs into the audio jack of a mobile device. The customer swipes their card, and the seller receives the payment for the transaction. And now I'll hand it over to Caroline to talk about effective filing.
So, the family history of any patent is the original patent and all of its continuations and continuations in part. Family history also shows the evolution of the claimed invention. You can see how an invention starts off in its original patent and how it gets improved and how it evolves with each new feature that gets added in the next patent. Family history also is important because it shows the effective filing date for the patents, or the dates that those patents get filed to the U.S. Patent Office. Effective filing dates get passed on from parent patent to child patent. However, any new information that gets added to the new patent doesn't adopt the old effective filing date. Instead, it uses the filing date of the patent to which that information was added. So now how does that tie back to our patent? Well, the 200 patent, which is the child patent in this situation, has a few claims and figures that will later be talked about in the presentation that were not in the original patent. Instead, that information was added later on in the grandparent patent. So those figures and claims will take the effective filing date of March 14th, 2013. Now, when we're looking for prior art, any of the sources that we would find when we look at their publication dates, for those specific claims and figures, we would compare them to the March 14th, 2013 date to deem whether that information is prior art or not. Now, to talk a little bit more about the claims. So, our patent has 2 independent claims and 17 dependent claims. The first independent claim talks about the components of our point of sale system. That can include a mobile device, touchscreen, central processor, so on and so forth. Those dependent claims, 2 through 13, then further go into detail about all of those components. They talk about encryption, active sleep mode, biometric scanners, and so on and so forth. On the other hand, claim 14, our other independent claim, talks about the processes and methods of our point of sale system, talk more about how the entire system in its entirety works. The dependent claims, then 15 through 19, further define those processes. They talk about tamper fraud detection, encryption, and other processes like such that are in the point of sale system. Now we're going to go back to Diego to talk about ex parte re-examination.
So our goal with this project is to file an ex parte re-examination. An ex parte re-examination can be filed anytime after the patent approval date and before the expiration date of the patent. So what's going to happen is that the third party sends in prior art that they think is relevant to the novelty of the claims of the patent. When they send in that prior art, which has to be before the filing date of the patent office will take a look 6 to 8 months later, and if they also agree that it has relevance on the novelty of the claims of the patent, they are going to reopen the examination process, and the inventors have 20 hours to work with the patent examiner to fix those problems with the novelty. So we use 2 sets of prior art to invalidate the 200 patent. The first set, the first patent was written by Lisa Falzone. It is a POS system, that has peripheral devices that take in user input, such as a card reader, and the POS system takes that data and sends it to a host network where the financial transaction actually takes place. The second set of prior art are 2 sources, 2 patents used together to invalidate the claims. And the first one was written by Gregory Gannon. It consists of a wireless card reader that prompts the user to swipe their card. And the second patent is another POS system which connects to a peripheral device and sends that information to a host server where the financial transaction takes place. Both of these sets of prior art are able to hit all of the independent and some of the dependent claims that are in the 200 patent. And I'll hand it over to Karen to talk a little bit about it.
In order to form our arguments, we use claim charts to analyze our prior art sources. So as you can see, on the left are the claims taken verbatim from the 200 patents, while on the right are quotes that we found from the prior art source. So these quotes are used to find and determine the correlation and find the equivalent element for every element that was claimed in the 200 patent. So, like I said before, the claim charts are used to form our arguments. So, in the case of the Falzone argument, we operated under 35 U.S. Code 102, which is lack of novelty. So, the Falzone prior art source anticipates each and every element of the 200 patent claims, which are listed on the left, and these elements all have an equivalent element in the Falzone claim. So we use the claim charts to annotate and find these equivalent elements to prove the lack of novelty in the 200 patent.
Our next argument was done under 35 U.S.C. 103 for obviousness. The combination of Gannon and Kleiman provide enough information to invalidate every single element of Claim 1 of the 200 patent. As you may notice, there are 2 sources listed instead of 1, as was mentioned for the previous argument. This is because 35 U.S.C. allows for multiple sources to be combined, as long as a person having ordinary skill in the art would be motivated to do so. Since Gannon represents a card reader and Kleiman represents a POS system, which is compatible with peripheral devices such as card readers, these 2 sources would qualify for combination. And this is important for this argument, as although there are some elements of Claim 1 that are handled by one source, such as the central processor for climate, other elements, such as the touchscreen, require information from both Gannon and climate.
As for Claim 14, Falzone again hits each and every element of the 200 patent claims. So Claim 14 mentions the processes and methods in the point of sale system, while Claim 1 mentions the components of the point of sale system itself. So Falzone, we did the same thing with the claim charts and used each and every element from the claims to show the lack of novelty within the 200 patent.
And once again, under 35 U.S.C. 103, we have Gannon and climate, which together in combination invalidate every element of Claim 14 and prove that it would have been obvious to a person having ordinary skill in the art at the time of filing.
So to conclude, the U.S. Patent Office erred in granting patent 10-643-200 to Block Inc. because they failed to consider the prior art references, Falzone, Gannon, and Kleiman, which prove the lack of novelty and obviousness in the 200 patent. So our future goal is to submit our ex parte re-examination to the official U.S. Patent Office because we believe we have met the burden of proof necessary to invalidate the patent. We would like to acknowledge the following for the continuous support throughout this project. Here are our references, and thank you so much for listening to our presentation.
What was the most challenging part of your project?
So I'd say the most challenging part was determining which prior art sources to use. There's just so many patents and references out there, but it was really difficult to comb through them and understand each one to determine which prior art source we should actually take the time to comb through and search for those elements that we needed to hit with the claims.
So that was my question. How did you find Kleiman and Falzone and Gannon, and have you been in touch with them to let them know this?
Well, we would certainly like to. We have not been in touch with any of the sources, but we basically use different online databases, such as Google Patents, to find previous inventions, and we also just use regular Google searching to find prior art sources that weren't through patents, even though in the end, we ended up just using other patents. Yes.
What happens if the patent gets taken down?
So, this is a very good point. If an ex parte re-examination does actually occur, they have 20 hours to work with the patent examiner to get those claims done. The reason we picked Block as a company to target is because they're a multi-billion-dollar organization, and it can be quite expensive to deal with that. This is a patent that is still valid until 2030, and they're not necessarily expecting an ex parte re-examination on this patent in general. So yeah, it's in the tens of thousands to kind of hire patent lawyers to try to fix it. That's why we picked Square. But if they do, they have 20 hours to work with it, and if they do not get it within the 20 hours, then the patent is taken down. Yes.
First, I applaud your explanation of patent law, so I appreciate that. The second question, though, my question actually is, how did you guys define the person of ordinary skill in the art, and how did you actually use that to combine those two elements as you, especially on the non-obviousness assessment?
So when we were defining who a person of ordinary skill in the art is, we just assumed someone who works in the field and essentially kind of knows everything about the field. That's generally the standard that is used. And so when we saw that Gannon was a system that can run transactions and that Kleiman could be used in combination with card readers, we decided to combine them since we saw that a person of ordinary skill in the art, a person familiar with creating card readers and card transaction systems, would assume that a system that can process transactions and a card reader could be combined together.
How often is a patent wrongfully given?
So the patent process is actually a pretty interesting process. So when an application is filed, the examiner only has 20 hours, I believe, 20 hours to read through the entire patent and search for prior art sources everywhere. This process took us 3 weeks, 4 weeks to do, and so there definitely is a lot of errors that are possible. Another thing is that the patent lawyers need to really be familiar with the jargon used in the patent office, because even while we were using the prior art sources, they were using completely different words, and it took a lot of time for us to sit down and really understand the patents so that we could determine which elements were equivalent, which is why we color-coded them.
How close are you to following through with the ex parte re-examination?
Okay, so currently we are talking to patent lawyers and we are asking for their opinions. So our mentor has given us information on whether or not he thinks that our patent is, our ex parte re-examination would be valid. So we're currently in talks.
What would the immediate impact be to block if the patent were withdrawn or invalid?
Well, okay, so the patent has been used in legislation before, so it has been challenged. That was around 2010. But in terms of block, they are going to have to spend a lot of money to try to fix it. That's like the main issue.
Well, also the reason that we chose this patent and the reason that that Block Inc. will, although it will be an inconvenience to them, it won't have a major impact on their company because they are such a big corporation. So we targeted a larger corporation versus a small business that, or like a small inventor that had a patent, in order to just stay ethical with it.
It's a lot more costly to someone working in their garage versus, you know, a giant company. Yeah.
When you say fix it, what exactly do you do? You have to do something to pay it back?
Yeah, so, well, essentially you have to hire a bunch of patent lawyers to try to challenge our arguments or fix the claims in such a way so that they address the aspects from the prior. So you have to change the wording of the claims.
In your patent law class, did you do any discussions, any background to understand why there's this short time frame for review? Because it sounds like what you're hearing is that you need to be a big company with a lot of resources to defend this, and also because it's such a short time frame for review, there's not a lot of time for the patent office to look outside to see whether there's any other prior art. So it's going to be the bigger companies that are going to get the patents and then make a lot of money off of it. So have you talked at all about the policy on the 20-hour review?
Since we had such a short time frame to actually complete the entirety of the project, we didn't get a lot of time to go too deep into the background information. So I pretty much learned that they have 20 hours and that's what they're given to work with. But yes, it definitely is an issue with the patent office only getting 20 hours because it means that a lot of larger companies are able to kind of just pump patents through the patent office and patent very abstract ideas like the 200 patent did that really shouldn't be granted a patent.
The other part is that you need to, there's a fine balance between checking, okay, so this patent examiner is going through the entire human corpus of knowledge in 20 hours, which you have to find balance between doing the patent, like going through patents applications efficiently, and also getting through as many as possible, and being as accurate as you can within these examinations. So it's kind of this like argument between the inventors and the lawyer and the examiner where, yes, I want to get the patent approved, but they have to go through it to see the prior art, but also in that 20 hours. So it's an interesting process.
Another interesting point about that, which isn't super relevant to our patent specifically, but just about patent law in general, is that for medical devices, when there's a new medical device that a company wants to put in the market as soon as possible, they will try to patent it and get FDA approval simultaneously. And in the FDA approval, they're trying to show that, oh, this is something not new. This is the same as the previous device, so we can get it approved faster. But then with the patent office, they need to show that this is a completely new device, everything is brand new, and they can make all the money they want.
Okay, I got kind of an out there question. So it sure sounds like the patent office needs some help in order to go through these a bit faster. Did you come across any discussions of how the examination process can be automated?
Yeah, we actually did talk a little bit about that. There are some fields where automation does happen, but the main issue is that the vocabulary is so broad, and inventors will try to switch the vocabulary out to make it more confusing for the examiner. Because the more time you stall, right, the less time they actually have to read the claims and understand it. So there are certain algorithms out there, but the problem is that the fields range, the vocabulary ranges, which also makes it very difficult.
Thanks.
For the few pieces of prior art that you guys pointed out, it sounds like we sifted through a lot. Do you know if that was presented to the patent examiner?
So yeah, we did go through the references that were cited in the original patent, and these three sources were not seen by the patent examiner. We did find some sources that would also invalidate claims, but were cited at the time of filing. However, these were not.
I did notice that block share price is trading down about 4%. It's true the first time in the presentation, people issue with all this.
We'll see. 6 to 8 months, and we'll see. Thank you.